Thanks for inviting me down here, Anthony and Mars and the MedTech core. I'm the CEO and Chief Scientist of Volpara. We are an ASX listed company, and I'll come back to why I believe that's very important for you, everyone here, to understand. The talk I'm going to give, I'm going to start off with some of the glossy stuff we do as an investor presentation, but then I'm going to come right the way back and start going through the science story behind Volpara. I'm going to talk about commercialization, how to do it, some of the war stories we've had along the time, and kind of one of my big hopes coming out of this talk is that there'll be 2 or 3 people around here thinking, hey, I've got some ideas which I can go on and commercialise, and you know what? Even being in New Zealand, there's lots of funds around available to me, investors around here, to actually make things happen on a serious global scale. Okay, so that's my goal, and so excuse the kind of glossy stuff at the start, and then I'll step back into that rough and ready scientist mode. I'm trying to hold the pen to remind myself to be more academic than I usually am with investors, but let's crack on. Okay, Volpara then we are a software as a service company. We are an AI company. We apply AI to breast images. We do a range of tools to help breast cancer detection. 600,000 women a year die of breast cancer. It's our mission. It's been my mission for the last 30 years to try and reduce that number, and I believe we've done so with our software. We make a range of clinical decision support tools for people like Anthony and radiologists around the world, and practice management software as well. And I'll do a little bit of a deep dive into that. It's a very big business. About 92 million women a year get screened for breast cancer. We believe that the value our software brings, it could be up towards $10 per woman. So that's around $1 billion of annual recurring revenue available. And remember, this is kind of a mix of that investor talk and some of the other stuff. We have first mover advantage around the world in many of the things of what we do, based on all the science we've done over the last 20, 30 years. And we've got a great competitive moat around what we do in terms of intellectual property, patents, share experience, and at this point as well, data. And we'll come back to data in a minute. We screen around 1 in 4 women that get breast cancer screened in the US get screened using our software. It's one of my great regrets as of this point that our software gets used in Auckland at various sites. It gets used at one site in Palmerston North. It gets used, or the quality aspect of what we do gets used at one site in Wellington, but there's no Volpara software on the South Island, and public screening here doesn't use our software, and yet 1 in 4 American women get screened using our software. We want this software. We developed this software to help women here, and part of our mission over the next couple of years is to make that happen. So we're up to $20 million now of annual recurring revenue. 1 in 4 women, as I said. We've got negligible churn, which is always great as a software as a service company, very high margins. And we just raised $40 million or so in April, May as COVID hit to strengthen the balance book, but also to allow us to do merger and acquisitions. And one of the messages I'm going to kind of repeat during this talk is, I did a company in Oxford in the UK. Getting funding for that company was incredibly difficult. If you want to raise £1 or £2 million, it was very hard to do. Whereas here we are in Wellington, we've now raised over 130 million to do what we want to do, and most of that's come via the ASX. So in New Zealand, you've got an amazing source of venture capital. It's on the ASX, and that is available to all you. If you've got a good idea, start developing that company and start raising money, because it is there. Let's talk a little bit about what we do then. So this is your ideal Volpara clinic. The woman walks in the door for her breast cancer screening. She's given a tablet. Of course, we launched the tablet in about February this year, and then COVID hit, and suddenly it's like, tablets? No tablets. So this has now gone online at home. That was an interesting kind of, what can you do about that, apart from react quickly? So she fills in patient history, BMI, family history here. She has x-rays done. Our software analyzes those x-rays and say, Mrs. Smith, these are good images. You can go home, the radiologist will look at them tomorrow or the day after. Or we say, the nipple was not in profile in this image. We're going to retake the image whilst you are here. Okay? So really trying to make it a one-stop shop. At the moment, around 3% of these women will go home. They'll get a phone call saying, the image isn't very good, please come back. As soon as she gets that phone call, she thinks, I've got breast cancer, when in fact it was just bad image quality on the day. The good quality images then flow to the radiologist, Anthony or one of his colleagues. The radiologist there is looking for signs of cancer. One of their first tasks, though, is to assess breast density, which is the amount of glandular tissue in the breast, and I'll talk about that in a second, and assess the woman's general risk. Our software then reports automatically a breast density score, a lifetime risk of developing cancer, and other factors for her to build into her clinical decision support there. Our software then produces automated letters saying, Mrs. Smith, no sign of cancer, relax, come back a year's time. Or, Mrs. Smith, there's something suspicious here, we want you to come back in for further checks. I'll return to that one in a second. All this data then, that's our clinical decision workflow here. All that data flows up into the cloud where our practice management software comes into play. So we have Patient Hub, which tracks all patients, and we have Volpara Enterprise, and again, I'll do a bit of a deep dive on this, which shows you how all your X-ray machines are performing. It will say to you, that X-ray machine over there is giving out double the radiation dose of your other machines. You need to look into it. Or it will say, your technologist over here, she's over-compressing the breast, and that's why you're getting so many complaints from those women, and they're not coming back to your clinic. Okay? That's the kind of thing we do there. And again, I'll do a bit of a deep dive here. The key thing about us here is we used to sell just one product, the density product, but we're now a whole platform, and individual products are good, but if you can get all the data flowing between them, they're much, much, much more powerful. So now, for example, if this woman walks in here, if she's in a wheelchair, and so that she can't be positioned properly in the X-ray machine, then the technologist will say, hey, this woman was in a wheelchair, and that information will flow onto our patient scorecards, and it will flow up here into Volpara Enterprise as well. So the radiologist sits here, and the radiologist doesn't say, these images are crap, let's call her back. The radiologist will see the scorecard go, oh, they're not great quality, but oh yeah, she's in a wheelchair, there's no point calling her back, I need to do the best job I can on these images. Quite a simple thing, but reduces a lot of stress and uncertainty in the clinic by doing that kind of stuff. There was a great question earlier. Why do you do what you do? For me, I was very good at computing and maths at Oxford, and then I was looking to do a PhD. At the time when I was looking around, it was all about neural networks and stuff for mobile robots. Get a mobile robot to run around here without crashing into stuff. I looked at that and it was just frankly, it bored me to tears. I was like, nah, that's not for me. And then I talked to Professor Sir Mike Brady. His mother-in-law just died of breast cancer. And he said, look, screening is good. It saves a lot of lives, but it can be improved. Why don't we look at AI for breast cancer imaging? And so that's kind of how I started my journey. Since then, my aunt has died of it. My sister-in-law has died of breast cancer. And then, we get things like this comes through to me. This is a patient letter, and it went to someone I know very well last week. And I instantly see this, and obviously I recognise it because it's got Volpara all over it. I think, well, she's 35. Why is she getting a mammogram? You only get a mammogram at age 35 if you've got a lump in the breast. But I was incredibly reassured to know that she was going to a Volpara clinic, because that meant that clinic was doing very high quality work and really caring about the quality of the work that they do. So for me, this is a great kind of testament to why we do what we do, to make this sort of detection and diagnosis as good as possible. In this case here, I'm very happy to say this lady walked out with a fibroadenoma, which is benign, so that's all good. So let's go back into the academic world now. My pen has just reminded me about that. I started doing this in 1990, so it's been 30 years or so, right, from my PhD, which sketched out some of the work we're going to jump into all the way through to get into 25% of the US market. Going from that kind of the PhD all the way through is a long journey. You have to be very patient, you have to be very resilient, you have to be relentless, all those good things which I think a lot of Kiwis are. And let's have a look at some of that. We are kind of unique around the world in some of the things we do. So the woman's breast is compressed between two plates when an X-ray is done. This is to stop her moving. Okay? If you move, you get a blurred image. If you over-compress the breast, she feels too much pain, she doesn't come back. If you under-compress it, she moves, you get a crap image. So there's a real balance in there. We help sites around the world work out what that balance is. We kind of uniquely then work out a very accurate volumetric score of breast density. So the breast is consisting of fat and fibroglandular tissue. The more white stuff you've got, the higher your risk of developing cancer, but also the higher risk your cancer is missed at screening. Okay? Again, I'll touch on that in a minute. If you measure this in 3D, which is how we do it, and again, I'll touch on that in a second when I do a bit of a science deep dive, then you can actually work out what an accurate radiation dose is to the breast. So we've become world leaders in measuring radiation dose during breast cancer screening. We also do a huge amount of work on breast positioning as well. Is the nipple in profile? Are the left and right breasts nicely symmetrical? I will just give a shout out to one of the people in the audience. She's probably quite shy about this, but yeah, we always bring a smart physicist in to help us annotate images. Going back to some of that deep learning stuff earlier, it requires lots of annotation, and Alex over the back there spent many months in our office marking nipples, marking pectorals, marking all kinds of things. Let's talk a little bit about breast density because it's a really interesting subject for me. 1976, John Wolfe is a professor in Wisconsin in the US. He is a radiologist. These are the first kind of X-rays of the breast which were done back then, so they're kind of inverted to how they are now. John Wolfe postulated that the amount of, or the pattern, or the amount of kind of fibroglandular tissue in the breast was directly related to breast cancer risk. He did a study, a small study, which produced this paper. The paper said that if you've got one of these DY breasts, I'm not quite sure, down here, you are 30 times more likely to develop breast cancer than if you've got one of these N1 breasts, okay? 30 times. That's just off the scale in terms of risk. There was a very small study. In his paper, he said women with DY breasts should consider prophylactic mastectomies and so on. No one could repeat his study. We talked earlier about study validation, right? No one could repeat his study. So, the whole field of breast density and breast pattern and breast cancer risk went down the tubes and went into disrepute for 20 or 30 years. So, I look back at this now, I can't work out whether John Wolfe was a hero for spotting the relationship or a villain for overhyping it and putting the whole field into disrepute. Fortunately, there was a guy, though, called Norman Boyd in Toronto who thought that John Wolfe's work was valuable. But what Norman did was kind of start to quantify, instead of having these very subjective measurements of N1, P1, DY, which were incredibly subjective, Norman started bringing up the images, having people draw around them and saying, okay, this is 10% dense, 20% dense, 50% dense. He then he produced hundreds of papers then showing that if you've got lots of fibroglandular tissue, lots of white areas in the breast, you're 4 to 6 times more likely to develop breast cancer than a woman with a fatty breast. That's still a huge risk factor, but much more realistic than the 1 to 30. So if you roll on now, our mission then, in 2008 when Volpara was formed in Wellington, was to take these 2D X-rays and to try to quantify them. We took what we call a radical viewpoint, which was we view the breast as being a 3D object and not just a 2D image. So therefore, we were going to score it in 3D, even though you've only got this 2D projection X-ray. So in many ways, we were formed to do the impossible. This is a photo of me in about 1990, and I'm just putting this is the parks in Oxford, which looks pretty similar actually to Hagley Park. I was walking through there watching the cricket, thinking this is similar to parks. My PhD in 1990 then was all about bringing X-rays, trying to standardise them before doing neural networks, i.e. to do computer-aided detection. And a byproduct of that standardisation of the image was breast density. We didn't know it at the time. No one at all was interested in that breast density scoring that we were doing back then. Literally no one. But then in 2006, the US in particular started saying every woman has to be told their breast density, and suddenly all that science we did 15 years ago, it was the time for that science. The clinical world had caught up, and the FDA is about to mandate that every single woman in the US should be told her breast density, and that's going to be, so if you remember now, so we've gone from 1970, the first kind of paper, 50 years later, the FDA and other organisations have kind of now accepted all the science. So it's been a long journey. The groups like the American College of Radiologists, who you'd think would be kind of on side with some of this, fought tooth and nail for women not to be told breast density. So, science is there, but then there's all these other dynamics out there in the world that you need to overcome to actually get to commercial reality. So this is my PhD in many ways. We on the left-hand side here, you've got an X-ray. We took this radical viewpoint that the breast is 3D, and each pixel here we score to give a volume of fibroglandular tissue. So for example there, we might say 1 cubic centimetre of fibroglandular tissue, and we can generate these kind of neat density maps, and we can tell you the volume of the breast, the volume of dense tissue, and the overall ratio of it. We do this using a mix of X-ray physics, back to one of the points earlier, plus AI. We're not pure AI. We very much are based on physics, based on common sense, based on good science, but we use AI to kind of underpin what we do. So if the AI says, hey, you're doing something stupid here, then we can correct what we're doing. This just shows you some of the issues we face. This is what you call the raw X-ray data. This comes off the X-ray machine. And this is the images which the radiologist sees. These images are being processed by the manufacturers, and each manufacturer does it in a different way to make the images look good for cancer detection. Okay? When they do that, they try and hide breast density to draw out the signs of cancer. So a couple of points there. One then is it's incredibly difficult to, by eye, judge breast density because the manufacturers are changing it almost on a day-by-day basis. But also, if you're an AI developer, and there's a huge number of these popping up all around the world now, they all try and use this presentation data because that's what's kind of stored by the hospitals. Whereas the raw data you can get very easily off the X-ray machines, and it's a standard image. So if you're an AI developer, I would urge you to look at the raw data and seek that raw data out. And Antti, I'm not sure if your machine gives raw data out and presentation data, but it just staggers me. There's a guru of AI in the UK who's been saying AI is going to rule the world in radiology and so on. And I was staggered the other day. He said to me, the trouble with AI is all the manufacturers change how the images are processed, and each time they do that, they screw the algorithms up. So we're going to make it so there's a law that in the NHS, if you want to get an X-ray machine into the NHS, you're going to have to give off a standard image ready for AI. And I said to him, Hugh, what about the raw data? And he said to me, what do you mean the raw data? It was quite a, we talked about AI earlier, the AI hype. I mean, think about the physics. You make your life easy, get the raw data. It's there. We give our software out around the world for independent testing. This is a great result from Taiwan. We've had over 300 papers now using our software. So because it's all based on physics but underpinned by some AI, we know it's going to work anywhere in the world. So, for example, this shows breast density change with a woman's age. This kind of data no one else in the world has ever seen, other than us and academics. So Women's peaks at age 25, it slowly decreases, the amount of fibre going to tissue drops over menopause, and then it slowly decreases. We're doing a huge amount of work now saying, okay, well, what if it doesn't drop like that over menopause? What does that mean? Is that increased risk of breast cancer? And to prove those relationships, we need data on a scale that many other people have not had. I'm going to touch on this, and I'm going to speed up a bit. I did start 5 minutes late. So I think I'll touch on this. We talked about breast compression earlier on, right? Common perception, people, all these experienced people that compress the breast say to us, you can't overcompress the breast. So we did a study, I think it was 80,000 women or so on. This actually shows that cancer detection at low compression drops off. At high compression, it drops off as well. So the theory is if you overcompress the breast, you get all the blood comes out. That blood is in fact kind of a contrast agent to show up cancer. So this common kind of theory that you can't overcompress the breast is completely wrong. And again, power of data with good measurements. I'm going to flick through the products. We've talked about them a minute more, but key point is, as many people of you know, science is one thing, patterns is one thing, but then blood, sweat and tears, integrations, usability, regulatory, privacy, documentation, huge amount of work. So we always say science is about 10% of any product. It's critical, but it's only about 10%. Huge amount of blood, sweat and tears to get you the rest of the way. I'm going to skip through some of this. I will just note, Volpara, this is our quality control. It all flows into the cloud. We have something like 30 million images now up in the cloud that we're allowed to use for product development, but we're not allowed to sell it. We're allowed to use it for product development. That's one of the world's biggest data sets. Why is it important? That's because you get all these weird outliers, pacemakers, silica implants, portacaths in the breast that our algorithms need to deal with. We've got enough data now to deal with all these outliers. I thought it was a great talk earlier about MRs for the implant stuff. But commercial stuff. In the medical world, you need money and you need lots of investor patience, and I really believe you need to crack the US. US is where the early adopters are, but also I think you need to keep very focused on the end person, in our case the woman. We've decided recently that radiology moves very slow, it's very conservative, so we need to appeal more to women about breast compression, radiation dose, accurate density scoring to get to better cancer detection, and therefore we can kind of cause a revolution in breast cancer imaging. So as I said, right, we've raised over 130 million. That's a staggering for a company in Wellington that can do that, whereas I was in Oxford and you'd think it'd be easy funding, right? Very difficult. Whereas in Wellington I could do it. Big US market share. We are right around the world as well, but our big focus is the US. Medical takes a long time. This was a 10-year randomized controlled trial we did in the Netherlands. I told the investors 10 years ago, we're going to get no money from this. It's going to take 10 years to get results out. They weren't very happy. But fantastic results when they come out. And there you go. Thank you.